Mzansi Afrika molweni. This week, the official vaccine rollout in South Africa was supposed to begin. But fewer than 3% of healthcare facilities have actually commenced with vaccinating people. Added to our woes are the return of rolling blackouts and skyrocketing crime statistics. It is clear that South Africa needs change, and it needs it now. Change is possible, and that is why this Saturday, the DA is holding the Time for Change rally, which will be the largest virtual rally in our country's history. And we will bring together like-minded South Africans who pledge to join us in bringing the hope and the change that we need. Today, we will unpack what to expect this weekend. But first, we take a look at the weekend headlines.
Independent Electoral Commission has set aside the 17th and 18th of July for voter registration ahead of the October 27th local government elections.
Phase 2 of the COVID-19 vaccine rollout begins on Monday, and this means that people 60 years and even older can get their jabs, but there's still a lot of uncertainty on how the process will play out.
Nobody knows what the plan is, and everybody is waiting. If phase 2 is supposed to begin on Monday with senior citizens expected to get vaccinated, how are they expected to stand in such long queues?
Urgent intervention is needed to address the dilapidated Netrach train station. That's according to Western Cape transport authorities, who are asking the passenger rail agency to act.
The country has recorded its highest number of murders in a space of 3 months since 2017.
Women and children claiming, of course, that they feel unsafe in their own home.
The titanic struggle between ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa and suspended Secretary General Magashule is far from over.
Magashule went on the offensive by serving Lutuli House with court papers, challenging the constitutionality of the party's step-aside resolution.
This week in the headlines, South Africa starts its official vaccination program. Quarterly crime statistics paint a dire picture, and the ANC's internal chaos continues. But first, last week the DA visited the Netrach train station to assess the decay of Cape Town's Central Line, which is under national government's control. What was once a vibrant hub for transportation is now an empty shell destroyed by vandalism, cable theft, and neglect. The blame must be laid squarely at the feet of the ANC for its complete mismanagement of South Africa's rail services. This is why the DA wants well-run local governments, such as the city of Cape Town, to take over rail services in this instance. On Monday marked the start of South Africa's official vaccine rollout, but there's very little to celebrate. Only 2.6% of vaccination sites are operating. Yesterday, government managed to vaccinate just under 50,000 people, whilst we need to be vaccinating over 300,000 per day. All of this whilst half of our healthcare workers are still not vaccinated. Meanwhile, the third wave has begun in some parts of the country. It is clear to me that South Africa needs accelerated and efficient vaccine rollout in order for us to save both lives and livelihoods. And this is what the DA will continue to fight for. Meanwhile, it appears government wants South Africans to be jabbed in the dark. It's unconscionable that on the eve of the most important event, our vaccine rollout, the nation is subjected to yet again load shedding. For vaccine rollout to be successful, you need cold storage capacity. This is why Eskom must account for their inability to keep the lights on over the winter months. Lives literally depend on it. The crime stats for the first 3 months of this year are out, and they paint a very dire picture. Every single day, more than 100 people are raped in this country. I want to repeat that. Every single day, more than 100 people are raped in this country. And yet, more than half of gender-based violence cases sit unresolved for more than a year. Added to that, the backlog in DNA testing worsens by the day. Murder is on the rise, with farm murders in particular increasing by over 83%. Literally, no South African is safe. This is why we must continue to call for more resources and boots on the ground instead of paying bloated salaries to administrators sitting in offices. Enough is surely enough. In the ongoing suspension merry-go-round drama in the ANC demanded an apology from Ace. However, he clearly was not in a very apologetic mood. He instead took them to court. Ace further revealed himself to be Zuma's #1 supporter by attending his corruption trial last Monday. The concept of a single unified ANC is just fiction, as is the concept that there's a good ANC and a bad ANC. Instead, the party is a chaotic factional war zone, which renders it absolutely unable to deal with the serious issues of ordinary South Africans. It is clear that these local government elections, it is time for change. And finally, with local government elections less than 6 months away, South Africans will have one chance to register on the 17th and the 18th of July. If you have relocated since the last time you voted, please make sure that you update your details on registration weekend, or you visit check.da.org.za. And if you're a first-time voter, this is an exciting opportunity for you to make your first time super special. And vote for change. Make sure that you bring and have your ID book and put the 17th and the 18th of July in your diary. Voting is your constitutional right. Use it. Don't lose it. In the spotlight this week, on Saturday, the DA will host the largest virtual rally ever seen in South Africa. We give you a taste of what to expect and unpack why change is so desperately needed in South Africa. Let's take a look at this story in the spotlight.
27 years into democracy. And in those 27 years, many promises were made to South African citizens. It is important, however, to take stock and to reflect on where there are shortcomings, because indeed those shortcomings do exist.
South Africa is facing both an energy crisis as well as a crisis of unemployment.
11.1 million people in this country are out of work.
South Africa's fragile economy is already off to a stumbling start, with rising coronavirus cases straining the healthcare system and electricity constraints coming back to the fore as load shedding resumes.
What can be done to curb the scourge of gender-based violence? It seems we've been asking this continuously for decades.
South Africa is not in a third wave just yet. The possibility is still very real.
Time is running out for healthcare workers and support staff to get the vaccine.
Corruption is a massive problem in South Africa.
Every day, the people of this country see the horror of ongoing state capture on full display in front of the Zondo Commission.
People today talk about the ANC, and it's almost as if the name ANC becomes synonymous with corruption.
Is the ANC collapsing, and can it be saved?
It is easy to be depressed about the state of South Africa at the moment and to lose hope. As a country, we've been through a lot, and there seems to be so much, then there seems to be no end in sight. It's hard to believe that things will ever change. But change is possible. The DA has shown in the Western Cape, where unemployment continues to drop, that South Africans have a better chance of getting ahead anywhere else in the country. And that's not just our opinion. Every independent national barometer affirms this. We have to bring this kind of change to the rest of South Africa and to restore hope. This is why this Saturday the DA is hosting the Time for Change rally. Due to COVID-19 restrictions, it won't mean a stadium packed to the rafters with thousands of people like you and me would usually expect from a political rally. This is a massive, coordinated digital undertaking, is going to be on the screens, in homes and in small venues across the entire country. It is said to be the largest virtual rally ever to take place in South Africa, and it has one aim: change. I recently conducted oversight visits across the country to see if South Africa's hospitals and clinics are ready to vaccinate our nation. And unsurprisingly, the result is dismal. Hundreds of thousands of healthcare workers still need to be vaccinated, and fewer than 3% of vaccination sites have begun to start vaccinating those who are over 60. I am desperate for change, and I'm sure you are too. Us South Africans are sick and tired of the onslaught of bad news and decay we see every single day. We need hope, but change is possible. To discuss all of this and more, we are joined in studio by DA leader John Steenhuisen, member of the Free State Provincial Legislature, and this weekend's host for the Time for Change rally, Karabo Khakhau. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Sir.
And welcome.
Thank
John,
you, sir. Great to be here.
I want to jump straight into it, and I think perhaps we need to take a moment to reflect on what we've just seen, in this introduction of the story in the spotlight. A lot of people are feeling as though, there's absolutely no hope, and the state of the nation is in dire straits. What is your view here, and where to from now?
Well, obviously, during the level one, I've been able to get out and about and meet with communities, and I've travelled to many provinces and many places, and people are afraid and people are angry at what they're seeing as their future being robbed from them by politicians who long ago stopped caring about them and are only interested in lining their own pockets and making their own families and richer and getting as many tenders as possible. And people are very, very worried about this future. But the key message I've been sharing with them is that change is on the way, that it doesn't have to be like that. And that South Africa is now, I think, at a critical crossroads where we have a choice to make. Either we continue down the same trajectory of poverty, of low growth, of high unemployment and infighting within the governing party, or we can choose a different direction. And our message is that change. It's only through change that you can get things done. And we've got to move that change in South Africa, which is why we've got the Time for Change petition that we've got running. We want South Africans to be excited about the change that can be. And imagine a South Africa where you have schools that are teaching, police stations that are actually keeping communities safe, where you've got universities where people have access, where you've got jobs, where you've got decent services. We can have that because we've shown you can have it in the Western Cape. And say what you like about the DA, we get things done. The DA gets things done, whether it's municipal services, whether it's growing an economy, whether it's providing 500 extra police officers, whether it's putting security onto the trains, whether it's assisting the poor, whether it's homeless shelters. We're getting things done. And life is better where the DA governs.
Absolutely. And so with people who would be almost, it seems to me that there's only one of two choices. Either we can continue with the same old non-delivery corruption and extreme grinding poverty, or people can take a chance and lend us their vote to show them what we can do.
The big thing is to say to people who've never voted for us before, what have you got to lose? It couldn't be worse than it is now for you as a citizen, without a job, with your kids sitting in a class with 40 other children receiving a substandard education, with sewage and rubbish running down your streets, unable to access decent services, every government department failing. What have you got to lose? Take a chance on change. Take a chance on the DA. We've got a track record of action, but most importantly, a promise of more. And we want to be able to bring that DA difference to your town, to your city, to your province, and eventually to the whole of South Africa. We're at that crossroads now, and if we don't make this change, I fear for what lies ahead for South Africans on that road going forward.
Karabo, I want to bring you in here. As a young person, when we start to hear statistics that over 60% of young people are without work, those are not just numbers, those are people at the end of those numbers. And as a young person yourself, what is it that young people at home can take away from this conversation about what we seek to do for them?
Well, it goes without a shadow of a doubt that it's depressing to be a young person at home wanting to put food on the table, knowing that nobody else but yourself at home can put food on the table. And it becomes incredibly frustrating when you are subjected to a government that doesn't instill hope whatsoever, that's not willing to change, a government that doesn't inspire investment in an economy that you are supposed to be participating in, an economy that's supposed to be conducive to extra business creation in order to have jobs that are created. But I think what we also need to understand is that we don't just need jobs. We need to ensure that we have a system that is accommodating, that prepares students or young people altogether to ultimately be able to participate in this economy. How do we do that? We ensure that our education system works. We ensure that even the pass rates that we have at secondary schools works. Not what we see, for example, in the Free Free State, where every year we celebrate an 80% pass, which is a nominal rate, when the real pass rate is way below 50% of young people who drop out of school, who fail because the quality of education they get is terrible, or who end up dropping out or not being able to successfully complete their studies, Siv, because of their living conditions back at home, conditions of poverty, living in municipalities where every day you wake up, there's no electricity, there is no water, there's no food on the table again. When you're on your way to school, on rainy seasons, you can't even get there because the whole entire street is a mud full of rain, when you could have had proper infrastructure that would have been able to ensure that you get to school altogether.
We're saying to young people that, again, if this is the choice that you have, you either can choose to, on this growth where over half of the young people who are in working age in this country are not with work, or you can lend us your vote, let us show you what we can do, because we actually have a plan to get you to work.
And I think we need to dispel the idea that only grown-ups or official politicians can make a change in South Africa. The change is ours because South Africa is ours. How do we effectively do that? By making sure that we all take ownership of our democracy and our lives, by taking our ID cards, going to register in July in the registration weekend to ensure that we have a voice and we change the situation around.
I think just to Karabo's point, just before local government elections, you often see service delivery protests. People throw stones, they burn things, trying to be heard. And, sometimes, government then comes and says, oh, we're going to do something, or they turn a sod because they're worried about what's going to happen in the election. But there is a far more important and far more effective form of protest that you can have, that's stronger than any stone and hotter than any fire, and that is that little cross you make in your ballot box on election day. And that there can send the best message of protest, that you are unhappy as a young person, that you've got a government that's left you behind, that you've got a government that does not care for you, that you're worried about your future, and you can use that as your greatest protest. And by voting for the one party that has that track record in government and has a commitment to building a new majority in South Africa and giving a voice to the voiceless. There are 30 million South Africans who are living below 1,000 rand a month. A lot of them, Karabo would know, are young people. These are people who were looking forward to a bright future but have had it completely stolen from them. Use that little cross that you can make as your stone or your fire to be able to send a protest that is really going to matter where it can make the biggest difference.
My favorite saying always is that you can hire and fire the government that you want through a ballot box. And for me, that's so powerful, right? Because you're almost like the CEO of the country yourself, because you've got this constitutional right and you can hire and fire people on the basis of that vote.
And there's another thing as well, and Karabo will, I'm sure, Karabo, there's a lot of young people who just don't vote. They say, oh, well, it's got nothing to do with me. Politics can't make a change in my life. There's no such thing as not voting. If you don't vote, you're actually voting for the status quo.
Sure.
You're saying, well, I'm happy with the way I'm happy with the way my government is reacting. And I think that if a lot of young people look very, very carefully about where we sit as a country, but most importantly, where we could end up, I think that they need to understand that there's no such thing as not voting. You've got to get out there and vote for change in South Africa. If you don't, things are going to stay the same or get worse.
Get worse. Absolutely. Karabo, so John has touched on the offer and you have, the offer that the DA has, and also this exciting virtual rally that we have coming up on Saturday. Now, talk to us about what people can expect. So, we want to really entice people back home, whet their appetite.
Well, listen, I myself, I'm sitting here, I'm excited. I wish I were there already. But we are in an election campaign, and this rally is just simply to bring everybody together, to have everybody energized and get them in the spirit of the election so that we can properly sell our message of hope and make sure that change comes on the ground to people. So we have exciting lineups. So we have Early B, and the exciting thing about Early B, listen properly, what Early B is going to be doing this Saturday is he's going to be releasing a track solely for the DA. And the name of that track, listen, we are levels, we're moving. And the name of that track is Real Change. We are getting there. We're going to have Emo Adams and his band. We're going to have MFR Souls with Upasi. So, Kokoti Piano, we'll have Temigosi Boy, we'll have Andriette. I know I'm excited.
Yeah.
I know you guys are excited.
Yeah.
And everybody at home should be excited, particularly because we're going to have about 400 watch parties across South Africa with tens of thousands of people watching across South Africa. The gees is going to be there. We are building up the spirit. We are on an election year. And hoi hoi, we are going to make sure that everybody is lit and having fun.
John, it looks like there's going to be a lot of political twerking on Saturday.
Absolutely. Well, I've been told I'm not allowed to dance in case I lose us any votes. But I mean, it's going to be such an exciting lineup.
Yeah.
And, you know, look at the innovation of the DA. Here we are in the midst of a COVID pandemic. We can't have a big rally in a stadium. We're not sitting back and moaning about it. We're saying, well, how do we get through this or around it or do something different? Just as we were able to during the coronavirus pandemic with, you know, our Corona cast, Siviwe, which remember started in our lounge, my lounge. And it's now we've got a weekly show where we're sharing exciting things with citizens. This rally is going to be a knockout. It's going to be part of history. If you're watching at home, you're going to want to be part of this because, you know, one day when it's spoken about in the Guinness Book of Records or when you Google the first online rally in South Africa, you want to be able to tell your kids and your grandkids that I was there listening to Early B and partying with Karabo and Siviwe and all the rest of us. But also listening to the message about how you can actively engage as a citizen in changing your country, changing your future, and getting that excitement going throughout the land.
I want to take a look at... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, what's also very important is, though we're all going to be watching, let's remember to paint the timelines blue. Let's remember to take that pledge to all take ownership of South Africa at timeforchange.org.za.
I want us to take a look at some messages. Let's take a look at this.
Ladies and gentlemen, I heard somewhere that they say it's time for change, and that's about to go down on the 22nd. You do not want to miss it. Exciting times. I'm going to be there. The band is going to be there. Watch social media. See you soon. Ja, Zahid is only B straight van die dalaf buisie. Ladies and gents, I just want to say, ek kom ietsie lekker uit. The 22nd May, it's so lekker jy. Go check it out. Exclusive track coming on timeforchange.org.za. It's gonna be lekker, don't miss it. Cheers!
Listen, I love Early B's. Yes, man. I'm a fan.
And you're not going to miss that new track. I mean, here's your chance to be the first people in South Africa to hear the new track.
You're right. That's exactly right. John, I just want to. I actually want to touch on something that you did touch on. A number of people are saying, look, let's postpone these elections. We're not quite ready. COVID is with us, and you know, and here we are saying, you know what, we're ready for an election. We're going to find innovative ways to reach people where they are. How has the party really galvanized around this idea of campaigning in a safe way?
It amazes me to see some parties not wanting to have an election. I mean, you exist as a political party to go to elections. And some of these parties are trying their very best to find a way not to have the election this year because they're terrified of what the voters are going to tell them. That's what they're most scared about. They're scared that this is a chance that people are going to get to talk about how they've mishandled the pandemic, how they've destroyed their jobs, how they've subjected them to the most terrible conditions in state hospitals and how their children's future is being robbed.
Yeah.
So here's an opportunity for us to be able to show something different, to be able to show people that it doesn't have to be this way, and that there can be something exciting happening in the future. So, I really just think we're ready.
Yeah.
Bring it on.
Yeah.
We want this election.
Yeah.
We want to be able to give people the opportunity to fight for change and to vote for change.
Yeah.
We've been ready for the whole year, and that's why we are able to roll out things like this. We don't imitate, we innovate. We find ways of new ways of speaking to people. And, I would say to those parties, get off your backsides and come up with some good ideas to energize people. You can't sit back there. Democracy waits for no man.
Exactly.
And if we delay this election, I'm going to tell you now, it is a slow path to the next time government's in a tight spot in a national or provincial election, they'll simply turn around and say, oh, well, remember when we had COVID, we delayed the election. And then your elections become 6 years, then they become 7 years, then they become 10 years, and then they don't happen at all. And we've seen it happen around the world, particularly here in Africa. We've seen it happen. And so we must have this election this year, because South Africa needs this election this year, because it's not going to get the change without those crosses in the ballot box.
And we've managed to do something pretty incredible, right? Where people say, well, are your branch meetings happening just on Zoom, whatever? Is that not exclusionary? But I mean, we have seen people in the most remote parts of the country, in Lusikisiki, in Mudimula Mukopong, basically getting together in very safe ways to be able to utilize our online platform so that we can really start to energize South Africa about
one of the former leaders of the party actually phoned me very excitedly during our last Congress to say that he had been on holiday in a very small town in the Karoo and had been walking down the street, and there, lo and behold, was a little DA office. So he knocked on the door and looked in, and there was this community in the middle of nowhere with a full room of people, obviously observing the protocols, locked around the TV screen, watching and participating in the Congress. How amazing is that? Being able to bring people together around that, in even the most remote locations around the country. And the best part about it, they said he couldn't come in because he wasn't a delegate.
So you now know that they were adhering to the rules. Karabo, I mean, just final thoughts from your side. I mean, John talks about, that the country's at a crossroads. And we know that we've got registration weekend coming up on the 17th and the 18th of July. And it's quite important that first-time voters, young people, everybody just needs to be able to understand that this is their responsibility to go out and register if they're going to be able to vote.
Listen, South Africa is a mess altogether, but there's hope and there's light at the end of the tunnel. That light is the Democratic Alliance, as John has clearly outlined. But we're never going to see that light unless we take ourselves through the tunnel. We take ourselves through the tunnel by going to register to vote so that we can make the change that South Africa so desperately needs. And I know young people were quite nonchalant about a lot of things because, it doesn't pay my Netflix bill or it doesn't take me to the next party. So why is it important? It's important because if you want to live a quality life, want to live in a South Africa where you don't have to normalize not having water, normalize not having electricity, normalize living in a decaying RDP house, if you even have an RDP house, because we have a lot of people who even die still on the list. But basically, when you live in a life like the DA-governed Western Cape, you can only get that opportunity if you vote for the change so that you can get there. So let's take ownership of our lives. Let's take responsibility. Democracy isn't something that we can just waste by sitting at home and not caring. But for ourselves and our children in future, for future generations, let's go register to vote, you guys. It's serious. Let's go register to vote.
And for me, I feel like, I'm obviously a bit of a youth and Dala now. Not as young as Karabo anymore.
45.
So, as a young person, I also do feel like, if you want a government to show up for you, you've got to show up for your country too. And for me, voting is a way of showing up for my country. It's the one thing that I'm actually responsible for. Any parting thoughts from you before we head on to the exciting thing?
I'm excited about the rally. But, the rally is just one step. And you've spoken about it. I think people mustn't forget what the right to vote cost many, many South Africans. They paid the ultimate price for this for this right to be able to go and vote. And as a younger generation, although I can't call myself that, I mean, I'm way over the cusp now, so I'm not even going to try.
I think ANC Youth League, though.
Maybe if I was challenging Oros, I would be able to. I'd be all right. But I'm over the cusp. But to say that it's young, I got into politics young because I didn't want old people making decisions that were going to affect my future. So if you're a young person, goodness sake, get involved. You don't want to be living with and having to clean up a mess that's been created by other people. And you do that by becoming an active citizen, and you get involved, you vote, you seek elected office, you become part of the solution. Don't be part of the problem. And that's such an important message in a democracy.
Thank you so much. I'm going to see you both on Saturday. We'll be back after this.
Adios.
Across the country. The DA governed mid-Val installed hundreds of taps in the Sicelo informal settlement. Last week, the DA-led Tshwane handed over 61 title deeds to beneficiaries. And the DA-governed Western Cape has made 75 Cape Access Centres now available to assist residents without internet access register for the jab. On to this week's Day at Work feature, we are joined by Dr. Zahid Badroodien, who studied medicine at Stellenbosch University and at 27 traded in his stethoscope to help influence health policy. Today, he is the MMC for Community Services and Health in the city of Cape Town. Zahid, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for taking the time out of your really busy schedule during this week to come and join us. Welcome to the Inside Track.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be back.
Cool. Listen, I want you to talk about, you're a medical doctor, and a lot of people have a lot of anxiety about why must I get vaccinated? What is this fuss about getting vaccinated? Why is the DA really onto this issue around getting vaccinated? Why must people get vaccinated, and why is it important since we've been fighting so much for it?
So we've been hearing for a very long time that the country is working very hard to achieve what they call the herd immunity and so on. But as you've said, we've not really reached that rate of immunizing people. And I think there's a couple of factors here in terms of this hesitancy that people are worried about, this COVID fatigue. People are tired of COVID-19. But we know that the vaccines are safe. It's a safe way that people are able to protect themselves from COVID-19. There's essentially three ways that we can do that. The first one being the COVID behavior that we've been speaking about for a long time. Social distancing, mask wearing, hand washing. Then the other option really is the vaccines that we're driving in the city of Cape Town through the registration and vaccination processes. And then there's a third, let's not call it the option, but the third way where people unfortunately get infected with COVID-19 but develop the immunity to be able to protect themselves further on. So the vaccine does that. The vaccine helps you build up this immunity to protect you from getting the COVID-19 vaccine. And this is why it's so important for our population across the country. We know the elderly, those with comorbidities, are at higher risk of getting COVID-19. And so we've seen now in phase 2, the first elderly people being vaccinated in what should have been, in my opinion, a better organized vaccination process. In the city of Cape Town, we're doing our best with the resources that have been provided to us in terms of the vaccines itself. But we can do much more to reach herd immunity specifically. perfectly.
I want to circle back to this. I mean, people at home, I mean, we must also understand that, you know, this COVID-19, the vaccine is not just the only, you know, type of vaccines. We've been getting vaccinated for a long time.
Yes, absolutely.
For against many things, childhood diseases.
Absolutely. You know, the first thing when someone has a child is to get the vaccines against a number of diseases to protect themselves. We get it annually every year. The flu vaccine that people religiously go to the clinics or other institutions to get the vaccine, and this COVID-19 vaccine is the same thing exactly. I know there's a lot of concern about and uncertainty about what this vaccine as well. There are many rumors and myths going around that we're actually injecting the real vaccine into people, but that we know is not the case. It's an inactive form of the virus that goes inside the body to help your body develop that immunity that it wouldn't have gotten unless you became infected with a vaccine first.
Yeah. John, the DA has been, for the past 14 months, at the forefront of saying, get a vaccine, get people vaccinated. Why has this been important for the party?
Well, it's been important for the party because it's been able to show South Africans that there is an alternative, again, to what national government's doing. So they spent most of 2020 doing lots of things that made them look very busy, but actually had very little impact on stopping the virus and getting us to herd immunity. And they dropped the ball on the one thing that is the game changer in getting us out of this nightmare. So while they were busy with, you know, whether you could buy cooked chicken or not, whether you had T-shirts, and how you should wear the T-shirt, whether you could buy Crocs or not, you know, these all peripheral silly things, you know, that made a lot of noise, but had actually no impact on the spread of the virus. It is an outrage that many countries around the world are almost through the tunnel, and the very first jab from the government went in on Monday this week. We're 33rd in Africa. 33rd in Africa. I mean, Zimbabwe, Sierra Leone, Morocco, many war-torn places have vaccinated people much ahead of us. They're far ahead of us. And as South Africans, we should be really angry that government now expects us to be grateful because we're getting 300,000 this week, 300,000 that week. We should be vaccinating, you know, those levels per day. Because if we continue on government's current rate, it's going to be 19 years before we reach herd immunity, which means now going into 2022 with this virus still hanging around.
And lockdowns, which are going to threaten to basically decimate whatever.
Well, lockdown is all they've been left with now because they've bungled the vaccine, because they're not going to be able to vaccinate at scale. I mean, remember, so they promised us 1 million people by the end of March. Well, I think we barely made 300,000. And Keys has now come and said 5 million people by the end of June. We just don't believe the government anymore, because every time they make a promise or commitment, they drop the ball and citizens suffer. So actually, just before we... This is an important point. Every single person who loses a family member or gets very sick from COVID now has a very clear place to put the blame. And that is on a government that has failed you and failed to keep you and your family safe. And you should be angry about that.
I want to quickly just add on to that. We also know that the government's response has been very sluggish from the very beginning, making up regulations that make no sense in terms of how to avoid being infected by COVID-19. And what we know, and perhaps if I can share an example, yesterday I visited one of the city's vaccination centers in Brackenfell. Now, government insists on centralizing a process that we are saying we as a province, we as a city can manage much, much better than you. Yesterday we had about 35 people at that one vaccination center. Don't you think we only received 10 vaccines from the central depot? It meant then that 24 people had to wait for the vaccine to be picked up by our staff from the depot, driven to our center. It needed to thaw. This is unnecessary waiting, unnecessary delays for residents who should be vaccinated as quickly as possible so that we can get more people into the vaccination queue.
Absolutely. Listen, I want to actually follow up on that. I mean, the city is trying to do what it can under very difficult circumstances. So obviously the supply of the vaccine comes from national government. What is the city trying to do in an environment where government actually wants to do everything itself?
So at the beginning of COVID-19, at the height of the lockdown, we already opened up about 80 overflow facilities. This was community halls converted into clinics so that we could separate those who were potentially infected from those who are wanting to access chronic care. We didn't want people to mix. We still have those facilities active today. Some of those are being converted into vaccination centres. 7 at the moment to open up in the city. We're ready to activate another 70 or total 70 vaccination centres in the city. We've trained just under 300 vaccinators to be able to man those facilities as well. We've got everything ready, all the tools. The only thing we're missing, John and Siviwe,
is
the vaccines. So we've only got 7 vaccination centres, as I've mentioned, but we are ready to open up the rest because we've planned appropriately in the city.
And South Africans should be afraid.
Yeah.
I mean, everything government has centralised or monopolised is a complete failure. We've got an airline that doesn't fly. We've got an electricity generator that doesn't provide electricity, or when we're sitting and rolling blackouts again. We've got a state arms manufacturer that doesn't manufacture arms. There's very little to have confidence in a national government that is messed up everything it's touched through its monopolistic practices.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for Eid postcards from 3 years ago.
From the post office.
So, I mean, the thing is that, the big race now is to get jabs and arms. And we should be leveraging the private sector as well, not only decentralised government, but the private sector as well. If South African breweries can get cold beers to every corner of this country, we should be leveraging, their supply chains, etc., to assist us. The private sector wants to help. The sooner we get herd immunity, the sooner their businesses can go back to normal.
Absolutely. So the sooner the country can open as well.
Dis-Chems, clicks, private pharmacies, GPs, private hospitals. It's an outrage. Only 4 private facilities this week. So only 4 opened this week. That is a recipe for disaster if we don't broaden and get at scale those jabs on the arm.
So we're saying in the city, sorry to interrupt you.
Please.
We're saying that there are 2 key important points for us, priorities. One, we've got to continue the vaccine registration process. In our province, we have about 28% of the population, the elderly population, that are registered at the moment. That's far too low. So what is the city doing? We've opened up all of our libraries where we have internet, Wi-Fi, broadband to be able to register. Our staff help those elderly to be able to do that. And I want to echo our Premier's plea that the youth need to jump on board here to help register families, neighbours, friends. But also our environmental health practitioners are going out in full force to SASSA pay points, to supermarkets, old age homes, wherever we've identified high-risk hotspot areas where elderly are located. We're using all the tools available to us to be able to connect as many elderly people to the registration and the vaccination process.
And of course, people must be encouraged to register, because what we don't want people arriving at healthcare facilities and not having had made appointments. So we want people on the system so they can get a jab as soon as possible.
No, 100%. And part of that speaks to our communication drive. And I'm so excited because a couple of weeks ago, the city was awarded a grant, a $900,000 grant from the Bloomberg Philanthropies that we're sharing with 11 other cities. But this grant is going to help us to fight myths. It's going to help us spread facts about the vaccine, but also going to help us encourage residents to go out and register for the vaccination. So we're saying we recognize that there are partners in this process. The private institutions, our residents are key partners in this process as well, but also other organizations that want to help see the city succeed because they know that this is a working city, a well-run DA city. And so we've got to make sure that as many of our residents are safe and healthy. But again, that rate limiting factor that we just seem to can't get away from is the insistence of national government to control the vaccination process. And the Premier is 100% right here. We can purchase our own vaccines. National government does not have to obstruct us from doing that.
And John, as a parting shot, I mean, if we can do this with the limited sort of powers that we have in a city and in a province, I mean, how much more can we do in a larger scale across the country, like what you've been saying?
Of course. And I mean, somebody said the other day, well, what would you have done? Well, we would have got these partnerships up and running right from the very beginning. We wouldn't have sat on our hands and waited a full year before we ordered vaccines. We would have been communicating with people. How do you SMS people the night before they're supposed to go out? There should have been, and governments had enough time. They know when the vaccines were coming. They've had months to be able to do the education process and let people know when to manage it better. Once again, it's just a complete mess because everything government touches turns to complete ashes. Decentralize it. Bring in partners in the private sector who have a vested interest in this. They want to be able to open their businesses again. They want to, restaurants, etc., want to be able to trade again. People want to get their jobs back in the factories that have been forced to close. So the private sector is a partner here. It's just this overweening desire to exercise absolute control, which is why voting is important, because by voting, you can take power away from an incapable government and put it back where it belongs, which is in the hands of the people.
Absolutely.
Zahid, you've been doing incredible work and continue to do so. And I mean, I'm sure you want to encourage people to go out and register. Register to vote, but also register for jabs. And we've got now 75 centres that we've created so that people can actually, who don't have internet access, so they can go and get registered.
And it just speaks to the power of DA governments in local government and in provincially. We're using all of our resources to get as many people to be able to register as possible. And as you've mentioned earlier, even just in this COVID-19 space, we've opened up 3 new safe spaces for our homeless community. Our homeless people are part of the community that are going to be registered and vaccinated. We're working with our partners. In which other city is this happening? Johannesburg still has homeless people in the community centres from lockdown level 5. We've been able to open up smaller facilities closer to communities for homeless people to access these services. This is a win in the city of Cape Town.
No, absolutely.
The DA difference.
The DA
because the DA gets things done.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much both for joining us, and we will be back right after this. Remember to make your pledge to get behind the change that South Africa needs at timeforchange.org.za. And tune in at 10:30 this Saturday for an event unlike anything the country has ever seen before. Until then, keep it tight, Mzansi.